They called him a janitor, invisible, forgettable. But Jack Monroe was more than the man pushing a mob. He was a single father, hiding a past the world never knew. And when a ruthless enemy tried to tear apart the only family he had left, Jack would step out of the shadows and prove that even the quietest man can bring down giants. This is not just a story about power and betrayal. It's about love, resilience, and the light you find where no one dares to look. But to understand how it all began, we have to go back to the night when everything changed. The city's financial district never really slept. Even past midnight, glass towers glowed like beacons filled with reflections of exhausted employees, chained to deadlines. On the 27th floor of Hartman Tower, the hallways shone under fluorescent light, silent, but for the steady rhythm of a mop sliding across marble. Jack Monroe worked with practiced ease, his broad shoulders bent but steady worn, boots squeaking faintly. At 38, life had carved hard lines into his jaw, yet his brown eyes held a quiet steadiness. To most, he was invisible, the janitor who appeared when the day ended. A shadow cleaning up the mess and invisibility suited him until the elevator alarm went off. A metallic screech rang out, followed by frantic pounding on steel. Jack dropped, his mop instincts sharp and strode to the blinking red light. Inside, voices rose high-pitched, panicked. "Help! We're stuck! Oh, God, I can't breathe!" Jack pressed his ear to the door, toggled the intercom. His tone was calm. "This is maintenance. You're safe. Stay calm. I'll get you out." A woman's sobbing reply came through. "Please hurry." He crouched, pried open the panel flashlight clamped between his teeth. Years ago, he'd rewired entire buildings. Tonight, he was just a janitor, but the knowledge had never left his hands. Sparks snapped as he worked, sweat trickling down his temple behind him. A sharp voice barked. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Mark Dugan, the night floor manager. Smug. Heavyset folded his arms. "You're a janitor, not an engineer. Step back before you fry someone." Jack didn't turn. "If we wait for city crews, they'll be in there for hours. The panel's overheating. They need air now." Mark snorted. "And if you screw it up, guess who gets sued?" "Me." Another scream tore through. The steel. Jack's jaw tightened. He twisted two wires. The cabin jolted, doors shuddering halfway open. Jack wedged in his shoulder, grunting until the gap widened. Shaken workers stumbled out, pale but safe. One man clapped Jack's shoulder. "You saved us." Jack only nodded, wiping sweat with his sleeve. But before relief could settle, Mark raised his voice so all could hear. "Are you insane? You touched that. Panel without clearance. You'll be lucky to have a job tomorrow." The rescued employees exchanged uneasy glances. They knew who had acted and who had only shouted. Jack said nothing. He picked up his mop, calm as stone. That was when another voice sliced through the tension. Smooth, cool, commanding. "What's going on here?" Every head turned. Isabel Hart stood at the end of the corridor. 35 sharp-wased, tailored navy suit, catching the light heels clicking with authority. She had been CEO for only 2 weeks, inheriting both a company and its rot. Mark straightened, grinning too wide. "Just a janitor. Overstepping, Miss Hart? Nothing to worry about." Her eyes flicked from the trembling workers to Jack, his shirt damp mop in hand. Something in the way he stood silent, composed. Unbent caught her longer than she intended. She asked the employees, "Who got you out?" A woman hesitated, then pointed. He did. Isabel's gaze fixed on Jack. He gave no defense, no plea, only a faint nod, then back to his mop bucket. Mark rushed in. He acted reckless. "You know the liability if something went wrong." "Did something go wrong?" Isabel's tone cut clean. Mark faltered. "No." "Then thank him before you talk about liability." Her words landed heavy. For a beat, Jack almost met her eyes. Almost. Instead, he kept mopping steady as ever. Isabel studied him one moment longer, then turned. Her heels echoed down the hall, fading into the executive wing. The employees whispered. Mark muttered curses under his breath. Jack finished the floor, wrung the mop, and pushed his cart toward the stairwell. Descending into the humming basement, one thought lingered. He didn't want gratitude, didn't want attention, just to finish the night quietly, a ghost in the machine. But upstairs in her glass-walled office, Isabel Hart stared out at the skyline, and for reasons she couldn't name, the image of the janitor forcing open those elevator doors refused to leave her mind. Morning light spilled through the glass. Facade of Hartman Tower, bathing the lobby in a sterile glow. Last night's chaos, the trapped elevator, the janitor who forced the doors open, already felt like rumor. Employees rushed past with coffee cups and phones while the man who had pulled them to safety blended back into the background. Jack Monroe stood at the service desk, clipboard in hand. His uniform was freshly pressed, though the dark circles under his eyes betrayed a restless night. Fixing things came naturally to him. Explaining himself to people who had already judged him never did. A secretary appeared. "Mr. Monroe. They'll see you now." Jack followed her into a small conference room. At the head sat Mark Dugan, smirk firmly in place. Across from him, Isabel Hart leaned against the polished table, her expression unreadable. A few other managers lingered, flipping through paperwork. Mark started immediately. "Mr. Monroe, about last night, your actions, while well-intentioned, could have led to a major lawsuit against the company. You bypassed protocol. That's a serious violation." Jack clasped his hands. "I just did what I had to do. People were in danger." Mark chuckled. "The rule book is there for a reason, Monroe, and you broke it. Now, about these maintenance logs. I hear there are some discrepancies." Jack said nothing. He'd learned the drill. No explanations, no appeals. Just take the hit, keep the job. But Isabel's eyes lingered on him, curious rather than condemning. He exhaled. "If there's paperwork, I'll fill it out. If there's a reprimand, I'll accept it." Mark leaned back, triumphant. "See? He admits it. Admits what, exactly?" Isabel's voice cut through, calm and sharp. "That he kept people safe when our systems failed." Mark faltered. "With respect, Miss Hart." "With respect," Isabel said evenly. "Maybe the liability isn't the man who acted, but the people who ignored the faulty reports stacked in front of them." She tapped the pile of papers at her elbow. Mark's jaw clenched, but he stayed silent. Jack lowered his gaze. He hadn't expected her to defend him, even briefly. Relief stirred, but uneasily. He didn't want to owe anyone, least of all the woman, who could end his job with a word. The meeting ended with a standard warning letter for protocol. Jack signed it without protest and headed out. "Jack Monroe." Isabel called after him. He paused. She studied him a beat longer than was comfortable. "That's your name, isn't it?" Jack gave a curt nod. "Yes, ma'am." Her voice softened, almost thoughtful. "You wear it like a weight." On her way out, Isabel flagged 3 ignored maintenance tickets to her inbox. She didn't know why, only that the pattern felt wrong. He said nothing, only dipped his head and walked away. That afternoon, the elementary school down the block released a flood of children into the sunshine. Emily Monroe darted through the crowd, her blonde ponytail bouncing. At 9, she had her father's steady eyes and her late mother's laughter. She spotted him waiting by the gate mop bucket, traded for a lunch bag. "Daddy!" she shouted, barreling into his arms. He lifted her easily, weariness hidden behind a smile. "How was school?" he asked. Emily dug into her backpack and pulled out a crumpled sheet of paper. A bold red A+ gleamed at the top. "I aced it," Jack kissed her temple. "That's my girl." On the walk home, Emily chattered about spelling bees and recess her small hand, gripping his. She didn't mention the boy who teased her about her father's job. She only held tighter because to her he wasn't a janitor. He was her anchor. At their modest two-bedroom apartment, Emily spread her sketchbook across the kitchen table. "Close your eyes, Daddy." Jack obeyed. "Okay. Open." On the page was a crayon drawing of a man in blue coveralls, a mop in one hand, and a shining shield in the other. Across the top, she had scrolled, "My hero." Jack's throat tightened. "Is that me?" "Of course," she beamed. "You fix things. You help people. Heroes do that." For a long moment, he couldn't speak. Then he pulled her close. "Thank you, M. That's the only title I'll ever need." Back at Hartman Tower, Isabel stood in her corner office, arms folded as the city lights flickered awake. Her assistant recapped the day's events, but she wasn't listening. Her mind replayed the image of the janitor in that conference room, silent, steady, carrying guilt and pride in equal measure. Jack Monroe. She whispered the name to herself, tasting it like a puzzle. There was more there. She could feel it, and for reasons she couldn't explain, she intended to find out. The boardroom on the 40th floor was a world away from the janitor's basement closet. Floor-to-ceiling glass framed the Manhattan skyline, the morning sun slicing through in sharp golden lines. The table gleamed like a stage for power plays. Isabel Hart sat at the head posture, straight pen in hand. Her leadership was still new, and every pair of eyes measured her. She had inherited a company known for profits, yet whispers of rot ran beneath the surface. She was here to scrape it clean. Ross Weller, the COO, lounged in his chair as if he owned the building. Ty Luce grinned, confident he thrived in meetings where charm buried numbers and numbers buried truth. Isabel flipped to the latest report. "Expenses and facilities and maintenance are climbing. Explain." Ross's grin held. "It's the usual equipment replacements, labor costs." Nothing unusual. Her pen tapped once. "Nothing unusual because to me it looks like theft bleeding through the margins." The room shifted. Executives looked down at their notepads, unwilling to be caught in the crossfire. Ross chuckled, but the sound rang thin. "With respect, Ms. Hart," he said smoothly. "We're talking about janitors and repair guys. You know how sloppy they are, forgetting to log losing receipts." That's where the cracks start. Isabel's jaw tightened. "So, your explanation for a 6F figure discrepancy is a janitor misplacing paperwork." Ross leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You're new here. Let me put it plainly. These people aren't like us. They don't think big picture. They're invisible for a reason." The words hung in the air colder than the glass walls surrounding them. That evening, Jack Monroe clocked in as the day shift poured out. He pushed his cart through the quiet corridors, unaware his name had just been dragged across a boardroom table. In the break room, two analysts whispered as he passed. "Poor guy. I heard they're blaming him for missing equipment. Figures he's always around after hours." Jack pretended not to hear. Defending himself only made the target bigger. He emptied trash cans, wiped counters, kept moving, but the sting clung like static. Then a voice stopped him in the hall. Monroe, Isabel, stood there, heels clicking against the marble. Her presence carried weight the silence couldn't mask. "Ma'am," he said, dipping his head. She studied him. "I need an honest answer. Have you ever mishandled company property?" His gaze stayed steady. "No, ma'am." "You understand the seriousness of the accusation?" "Yes, and still nothing to say in your defense." Jack's voice was calm, still beneath it. "Defending myself doesn't change minds already made up." Her brow furrowed. It wasn't defiance she saw. It was resignation. That unsettled her more than anger would have. "Who told you you weren't allowed to fight back?" she asked quietly. Jack allowed a faint, weary smile. "Life." The silence stretched between them, fragile as glass. Hours later, Isabel stood at her office window. the city a mosaic of lights below. She replayed his words. Life. One word heavy enough to fracture something inside her. She couldn't shake the image of him, steady eyes quiet under blame he didn't deserve. Down on the street, Jack sat on a bench with a brown bag sandwich. Emily's voice echoed in his ear from their call earlier. "Don't forget, Daddy, my recital's Friday." He'd promised he wouldn't miss it. Promises mattered more than paychecks. A group of office workers passed by. One muttered just loud enough, "There goes the guy who screwed up the inventory." Jack folded the sandwich wrapper, dropped it in the trash, and walked back inside. No reaction, no fight, only shadows trailing his boots across polished floors. The next morning, Isabel entered the lobby just as the janitor crossed it. Sunlight refracted through the glass panes, scattering across the marble like broken shards. For the first time, she noticed the reflection. The cracks weren't in the glass above them. They were in the way her company treated the man who cleaned its floors. Her hand tightened around the strap of her bag. Something was breaking, and if she didn't dig deeper, the whole facade might come crashing down. The staff break room smelled of burnt popcorn and stale coffee. A fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting everything in a tired yellow glow. Jack Monroe sat in the corner thermos beside him, flipping through a maintenance log. He preferred silence, though silence rarely lasted long. Two junior custodians barged in, laughing too loud. They spotted him instantly. "Hey, Monroe," one sneered. "Hero of the elevator, huh? Careful, you don't burn the place down next time," the other added. "Probably loves the attention. Makes him feel like more than the guy with a mop." Jack didn't flinch. He closed the logbook, screwed on the lid of his thermos, and stood. Cruelty only grew if you fed it. He walked past them without a word, his boots heavy against the tile. Their laughter clung to him like smoke. That night, after Emily was asleep, Jack sat at the kitchen table of their small apartment. The hum of the refrigerator filled the quiet. From a drawer, he pulled a faded photo, June smiling under a summer sky. Emily, still a toddler in her arms. He traced the edges with calloused fingers. Grief as constant as breath. Memories surged. A construction site 3 years earlier. Jack in a hard hat, confident hands, rewiring a junction box. He had been one of the best electricians in the city. That morning, June had teased, "If you don't smell it burning, you're already too late." He had laughed, kissed her cheek, promised to be careful, but no one predicted the faulty breaker, the sudden arc, the fire that moved like a beast. Jack escaped. June didn't. The guilt hollowed him. He walked away from the trade, from the whispers of respect and pity. All he wanted now was to keep Emily safe. Janitorial work was steady, invisible, a place to disappear. He pressed the photo to his chest. "I'm still here, June. I'll keep her safe." 2 days later, Isabel Hart left her suite earlier than usual. Crossing the lobby, she noticed a girl perched on a bench, swinging her legs. Blonde hair, a backpack too big for her shoulders. "Hi there," Isabel said gently, waiting for someone. The girl looked up. "My daddy. He works here." Before Isabel could ask more, Jack appeared from the service elevator, wiping his hands on a rag. He froze at the sight of them. "Emily," he said, quickly, striding over. "You weren't supposed to come inside." Emily hopped off the bench, smiling. "I wanted to surprise you." She hugged his waist, unbothered by the smell of cleaning solution clinging to him. Isabel watched, struck by how his entire frame softened when he looked at his daughter. Jack glanced at her voice, guarded. "Sorry, ma'am. Won't happen again." But Emily piped up before he could leave. "My daddy says, no matter what people think, you still have to do the right thing. That's what makes him my hero." The words landed harder than Isabel expected. She studied Jack, his shoulders tense, his eyes flicking away as though ashamed of his daughter's pride. There was more here, something he carried like a scar. Isabel crouched slightly, meeting Emily's eyes. "Sounds like you've got a pretty smart dad." Emily nodded, clutching Jack's hand. The smartest. Later that night, Isabel sat in her high-rise apartment overlooking the city. The glass walls reflected a woman who had fought too hard to afford mistakes. Yet her mind circled back to the janitor's daughter, to the way her words had lit something raw in his eyes. A man who bore blame without defense. A man raising a daughter to see him as a hero, even when the world saw only a mob. She poured a glass of wine, whispering to her. Reflection. "What are you hiding, Jack Monroe?" Meanwhile, Jack tucked Emily into bed. Her sketchbook lay open on the nightstand, his figure drawn as a superhero in blue coveralls. Emily yawned. "Daddy, yeah, bug. You'll be at my recital, right?" Even if work is busy, he kissed her forehead. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." As she drifted to sleep, Jack lingered at the doorway. Isabel's sharp gaze, Ross's sneer, the whispers they all pressed at the walls of his silence. The past he had buried was stirring again, and sooner or later someone would dig deep enough to uncover it. The office tower was quieter on Saturdays. Most desks sat empty, screens dark, leaving only the hum of ventilation and the occasional clatter of cleaning carts. Jack Monroe pushed his mop along the corridor, lost in thought. He liked weekends, less noise, fewer eyes. But today, Emily had insisted on coming. "I'll sit quietly in the lobby, Daddy. I promise." Jack knew she hated being left alone too long. Against his better judgment, he agreed. "Stay on the bench by the elevator," he told her. "No wandering. I'll be right down the hall." Emily nodded, clutching her sketchbook. But children are drawn to curiosity the way moths are drawn to light. Her sneakers squeak-ached as she slipped into a nearby corridor looking for a vending machine. She stopped at a half-open copy room. On the table, a stack of asset tags and a printed purchase order stamped Apex Logistics with R. Weller scribbled across the approval line. Beside it sat 3 new tablets boxed for after-hours delivery, the same model Jack had been accused of misplacing. A second man whispered, "Once the swap's done, the janitor signs the old log and we're clean." Emily didn't breathe. She snapped a shaky photo of the PO with her school tablet. Then her sneaker scuffed the tile. "Who's there?" She ran. Jack was wiping down a glass wall when he saw his daughter sprinting toward him, pale and trembling. Emily. He crouched, gripping her shoulders. "What happened?" Her eyes brimmed. "Daddy, I heard them. Mr. Ross and another man. They're going to blame you for stealing. They're making it up." Jack's stomach knotted. He forced his voice calm, where she pointed shakily down the hall. The corridor was empty now, shadows swallowing the men who had conspired. Jack pulled Emily into his arms, holding her close. "Listen to me," he whispered, steady but firm. "You can't tell anyone else what you heard. Not yet. But Daddy." Her voice cracked. "They'll hurt you." His jaw set. "As long as I'm standing, no one's hurting you. That's all that matters." She buried her face against his chest, muffling a sob. Jack's hand pressed to the back of her head, his own fear buried under steel. Upstairs, Isabel Hart stepped out of an elevator, scrolling through her phone as her heels clicked against marble. She had come in to work quietly away from weekday noise. That was when she noticed Emily, small, shaken, wiping her eyes as Jack tried to console her near the janitor's closet. Isabel slowed. Something about the child's distress tugged at her instincts. "Everything all right here?" Jack stiffened, rising quickly. Emily clung to his side. "Yes, ma'am," he said, voice clipped. She just got startled. Isabel studied him. His eyes were steady, but behind them a flicker, and the girl wasn't startled. She was scared. Emily whispered into her father's sleeve. Isabel caught only one word. Ross. Jack straightened. Well, be going now. His hand guided Emily firmly. Away. Isabel watched them disappear down the hall. Years in boardrooms had taught her to trust her instincts, and they screamed. Now something was rotting under her roof, and Jack Monroe was in the middle of it. That evening, Jack walked Emily home through the crisp autumn air. The city hummed, with weekend life sirens in the distance, laughter spilling from cafes, but their world felt unbearably small. On the apartment steps, Emily clutched his hand. Daddy, you can't let them do this. You didn't do anything wrong. Jack crouched, cupping her face in his rough hands. Emily, sometimes the truth doesn't matter to people chasing power. They twist it. But you, he pressed her hand to his chest, you're my truth. I'll protect you no matter what lies they spread. Her lip trembled. But who protects you? The question pierced deeper than she knew. Jack swallowed hard, forcing a smile. I've carried worse, Bug. Don't you worry about me. When she finally went inside, he lingered on the steps. Ross wasn't just cruel, he was laying a trap. And if Isabel didn't see it soon, Jack knew he'd be the one crushed when the curtain fell. Back in her penthouse, Isabel sat before a stack of expense reports, her wine glass untouched. The numbers didn't lie, but Ross's explanations did. She saw Emily's frightened face in her mind, Jack's silence hanging heavy. She closed the file, staring at her reflection in the glass. I need to know the truth, she whispered. The Monday rush consumed Hartman Tower. Phones rang, heels struck the marble. Conversations clashed in a blur of ambition. Jack Monroe was pushing his cart across the lobby when Ross's voice cracked like a whip. Pick it up, Monroe. This isn't your living room. Laughter rippled among a few junior employees. Jack bent without protest, collecting the spilled trash bag. His face remained still, but the red creeping along his neck betrayed the sting. From the mezzanine above, Isabel Hart paused mid-step. She saw Ross basking in his petty theater, while Jack absorbed the humiliation like weathered stone. Anger, sharp and unexpected, tightened in her chest. Hours later, with the office nearly empty, Jack wheeled his cart toward the service elevator. Mr. Monroe, the voice was calm, commanding. He looked up to see Isabel standing at her office door, arms crossed the city skyline, blazing behind her. Jack hesitated, then parked his cart and stepped inside. Her office gleamed with glass and chrome, the air faintly scented with eucalyptus. She gestured to the chair opposite her desk. Sit. He shook his head. Ma'am, I don't want trouble. Her gaze sharpened. If I wanted trouble, I wouldn't have asked you in. Silence lingered heavy until Jack finally lowered himself into the chair. Isabel leaned forward. Why do you let him speak to you that way? Jack's jaw tightened. Because words don't break bones, and I can't afford broken bones. That's not an answer. That's surrender. He looked at the floor, then back at her. You want the truth? Fighting back costs more than silence, and my daughter? He stopped shaking. His head. She deserves stability, even if it costs me my pride. The honesty in his voice pressed into the room. Isabel, who had spent her career reading lies in boardrooms, felt her defenses shift. Your daughter, she said quietly, the girl I saw the other day. Jack's shoulders tensed. Yes, Emily. She's 9. She seemed bright. A faint smile tugged at his lips. She is? She thinks I can fix anything. His eyes darkened. I just hope she never learns how often I can't. The words cut deeper than she expected. Isabel steadied herself. Mr. Monroe Ross is building something against you. If you keep letting him push, you'll lose more than pride. Jack's head lifted voice, low and steady. Then why are you telling me this? You're his boss. You could stop him right now. Not without proof, she said. Not without leverage. And you? She let the silence sharpen. You're the one who sees him clearly. But you keep swallowing your voice. Jack's hands rubbed together, calloused palms rasping. People like Ross always win. Men like me get swept under the rug with the dirt we clean. Her tone hardened. Not if I'm standing on that rug. The line hung electric. Jack studied her, searching for cracks in her conviction. He leaned back, a voice, almost a whisper. You think you can save me? No. Isabel's gaze didn't waver. But maybe you can save yourself if you stop pretending you don't matter. Jack swallowed. He wanted to dismiss her as another executive playing savior, but her words carried no pity. They felt like a challenge. Finally, he said, I don't know if I can trust you. Her mouth curved into a faint, knowing smile. Good, don't. Trust is earned. But Ross isn't half as clever as he thinks, and I don't intend to let him run my company into the ground. Jack rose slowly, towering over the desk. For the first time, he let his eyes meet hers without flinching. If he comes for me again, he said, steady as iron, I won't run. Not this time. Isabel nodded once, a spark in her gaze. Then maybe we're on the same side. When Jack left, Isabel lingered at the window, watching his reflection fade into the night. For years, she had believed strength lived in contracts and closing deals. But that man had just shown her another kind of strength, the quiet kind, carried alone, unpraised, yet unbreakable. She whispered to herself, testing the words. Maybe he's not invisible after all. In the service corridor, Jack retrieved his cart. His grip on the handle tightened, not from fatigue, but from something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. And hope he knew was dangerous. The morning at Hartman Tower felt almost too ordinary. Phones rang printers, hummed heels clicked across. Marble floors. Jack Monroe wheeled his cart into the storage room, unaware the day had already turned against him. Fluorescent light glared off shelves stacked with drills, cables, monitors, cleaning supplies. Jack checked inventory with the steady precision of habit. Order was survival. One mistake invited trouble. Trouble was already waiting. Ross Weller leaned in the doorway, arms folded, smile sharp as glass. Morning, Monroe. Hard at work, I see. Jack didn't look up. Someone has to be. Ross chuckled, stepping closer. Funny thing about details, they tend to slip. Jack finally met his eyes. If you've got something to say it. Ross tapped the clipboard in his hand, then walked off whistling, leaving unease coiled in Jack's chest. By noon, unease had hardened into dread. Human resources summoned him to the 10th floor. The conference room smelled of toner and nerves. Two managers sat across from him. Isabel Hart stood at the window arms, crossed her face, unreadable. One manager cleared his throat. Mr. Monroe, several pieces of electronic equipment have gone missing. Tablets, scanners, you were the last to sign them out. Jack frowned. That's not possible. I returned everything. Photos slid across the table. Empty shelves, signatures forged in his name. His stomach sank. Right on cue, Ross entered with a sheet of paper. Look what turned up surveillance footage. The screen flickered. Grainy video showed Jack wheeling a cart, a box on top. The angle concealed the contents. Cleaning supplies, Jack said firmly. Ask anyone. Supplies run short. I restock late. Ross shrugged. Funny how that box matched the size of what's missing. All eyes turned to Jack. Silence pressed in like a vice. Finally, Isabel spoke, her voice calm but edged. Mr. Monroe, can you prove what was in that box? Heat rose in his chest. I don't have to prove what wasn't. The truth is that box was full of cleaning supplies. You're looking at the wrong man. Ross's smirk sealed the moment. Convenient. The meeting ended with a suspension notice. Jack folded the paper slowly as though it weighed 100 labi, then left without a word. On a bench in the lobby, he stared at the notice. Emily's face flashed in his mind. Rent, Food, school, everything balanced on a single paycheck. Rage weared with despair. He had swallowed humiliation for years to protect stability, and now even that was being stripped away. That evening, Emily sat coloring at the kitchen table. Jack dropped the notice on the counter. She looked up, sensing the storm in his silence. "Daddy," he forced a smile. "Just work stuff." She frowned. "You always say that when it's bad." Jack sat across from her. "They think I stole. They're wrong, but they think it anyway." Her eyes widened. "But you would never." He reached for her hands. "You know that. But sometimes people with power write the story before the truth can speak." Tears welled. "Why don't you tell them about Ross? Because if I do, he'll drag us both down. And I can't let him touch you, Emily. You're all that matters." Her lip trembled. "But who protects you?" Jack's voice broke. "Nobody. And that's okay. My job is to be strong for us both." "It's not fair," she whispered. He pulled her close, holding her as though she might slip away. In her penthouse, Isabel reviewed the file again. The numbers lined up. The footage pointed to Jack. On paper, the case was airtight. And yet, it didn't fit. She remembered the raw honesty in his eyes, the way he refused to plead. Men who lied always begged. He hadn't. Closing the file, Isabel stared out at the city lights. Ross believed he had trapped a janitor, but she suspected he had underestimated the man entirely. The suspension slip sat on the kitchen counter like a verdict. Jack Monroe stared at it while the clock on the wall ticked louder than it ever had. Each second, a reminder that time and money were bleeding away. Across the table, Emily's crayons lay untouched, her small fists clenched at her sides. She had never seen her father look so heavy. "Daddy," she whispered, "why don't you fight back? Why do you just let them say these things?" Jack rubbed his face with both hands, exhaling slowly. He wanted to shield her, but she deserved the truth. "Because sometimes," he said carefully, "fighting back only makes you lose faster. And I can't afford to lose, not when it's about you." Her eyes glistened. "But Ross is lying." "Doesn't anyone care about the truth?" Jack leaned forward, wrapping his rough hand around hers. His voice dropped steady and unshakable. "Emily, listen. People can bury the truth for a while. They can twist it, cover it, make others believe a lie. But the truth doesn't die. It waits. And when the time comes, it breaks through." He squeezed her hand. "I promise you this. I won't let their lies be the last word. Not for me, not for us. That's my vow to you." A tear slid down her cheek. She climbed into his lap, clinging to his neck. Jack held her close eyes shut against the ache. The next morning, Jack rose before dawn. With Hartman Tower closed to him, he hunted odd jobs across the city. He hauled boxes in a warehouse, fixed a broken streetlight for a friend, even swept. Parking lots, anything that paid. By mid-afternoon, sweat soaked his shirt, and his back screamed with exhaustion. But when he tucked a few crumpled bills into his wallet, he thought only of Emily's worn shoes of her school recital that Friday. Still standing, he muttered, straightening his spine. That evening, Isabel Hart slowed her car at a stoplight near a pharmacy. Through the glass, she spotted a familiar figure, Jack paper bag in one hand, Emily in the other. His shoulders sagged, under a weight the world couldn't see. She watched him hand Emily cough syrup, ruffling her hair with a tired smile. He never noticed her. To him, she was just another car in traffic. But the image branded itself in Isabel's mind. Ross painting. Him as a thief while he scraped together change for medicine. Something in her gut hardened. Ross had overplayed his hand. Back in her penthouse, she poured water instead of wine. The picture of Jack carrying his daughter lingered heavier than any report on her desk. That night, Jack sat on the edge of Emily's bed, reading her favorite story. His voice was growly with fatigue, but steady. And the knight, though wounded and weary, stood between the dragon and the village because he knew someone had to. Emily's eyes fluttered, before sleep claimed. "Her," she whispered. "That's you, Daddy. You're the knight." Jack's throat tightened. He kissed her forehead and whispered into her hair, "Knights don't always win, Bug." But they never stopped standing. Meanwhile, in her corner office, Isabel sifted through late-night reports. Numbers blurred, but one truth stood out. The company's integrity was cracking under Ross's shadow. Her reflection in the glass stared back sharper than before. She remembered Jack's vow, the quiet weight of his words, even in defeat. For the first time, she felt the stirrings of her own vow. In the small apartment below the city's roar, Jack sat alone after Emily drifted to sleep. Sirens wailed, trains hummed, laughter floated through thin walls. He clasped his hands together, knuckles white, whispering into the silence, "I won't let the lie win." It was no longer just a promise to his daughter. It was a line drawn in the sand. And Jack knew the battle was only beginning. The conference room wire of printer ink and tension. Afternoon light sliced through half-drawn blinds, striping the table in bars of shadow. Jack Monroe sat with squared shoulders, the suspension notice still burning in his pocket. Across from him, two HR managers shuffled paperwork, their faces set in practiced neutrality. At the far end stood Isabel Hart, arms crossed, gaze fixed on Jack as if she were trying to read the script of a man who had stayed silent too long. Ross Weller lounged in a chair, smirk curling. "This is pointless," he sneered. "The logs are clear. The footage is clear. Monroe's guilty. He's stalling." Isabel raised a hand. "Let him talk." The room stilled. Jack's throat tightened. Silence had been his armor, keeping him employed, keeping Emily safe. But last night, her small voice had cut deeper than any lie. "Who protects you, Daddy?" He couldn't carry silence anymore. Jack's voice started low, shruff. "You want my story? Fine, here, it is." He set his palms flat on the table, calloused hands steady. 3 years ago, I wired light into buildings for a living. One morning, a breaker failed. The fire moved faster than breath and my wife didn't make it out. I've lived quiet since, not because I'm weak, because my daughter needed a father who came home. I didn't steal your equipment, I didn't touch your numbers, but I learned something in the smoke. Truth doesn't shout, it waits, and it will outlast every lie in this room. Ross scoffed. "Oh, please." Quiet. Isabel's tone cut like glass. Jack continued. "Stronger now. I didn't steal your equipment. I didn't fudge your numbers, but I know who did. I've watched." Ross blamed the weak because he thinks no one will believe them. And he's right, mostly because men like me don't get the luxury of defending ourselves. We're too busy holding on. One HR manager shifted uneasily. The other glanced at Isabel, waiting for her cue. Jack leaned forward, every word deliberate. "You can fire me. You can blacklist me. But don't tell me I'm a liar. I've buried too much truth already. I won't bury this." The silence that followed was suffocating. Even Ross's smirk faltered. Isabel broke it at last. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned. "Ross, do you have anything to add?" He spread his hands theatrically. "Nothing besides the facts. If we start letting Saab stories count as evidence, we'll have janitors running the company." Jack didn't rise to the bait. He sat back, letting silence work for him now, not as armor, but as weapon. Isabel's gaze swept the room, then settled on Jack. "Thank you, Mr. Monroe." Her tone carried weight, though no one could yet tell where it would land. The meeting adjourned. Papers, rustled chairs, scraped. Ross stormed out first, muttering curses. The HR managers followed, whispering under their breath. Only Isabel lingered. She approached slowly. "Why now?" Jack looked up exhausted, but unflinching. "Because my daughter asked who protects me, and I realized I couldn't tell her the answer was nobody." For a moment, Isabel's mask slipped. Her jaw tightened, but her eyes softened. She nodded once. "You should know," she said quietly. "Once you break silence, there's no going back." Jack rose. I never planned on going back. That evening, as he walked Emily home from school, the weight on his chest felt lighter. Not gone, but shifted. He had spoken. He had been heard. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. But Ross Weller was not a man who swallowed humiliation. In his penthouse, shadows stretched across glass and steel. Ross poured himself a drink ice clinking sharp against crystal. He lifted the phone voice a hiss. "Monroe's becoming a problem. It's time we end this for good." The top floor of Hartman Tower gleamed like a cathedral of glass and steel. The boardroom, stretched long and cold, its polished table reflecting the skyline. Men and women in tailored suits sat in silence, murmurs dying as the heavy doors closed. At the far end, Isabel Hart stood composed, deliberate, dressed in black. Her heels clicked once as she stepped forward, commanding the room without raising. Her voice. Beside her sat Jack Monroe, out of place in his worn blazer, his hands folded tight but his eyes held steady. Across the table lounged Ross Weller, smirk firmly in place. He thrived in arenas like this, power-placed theatrics reputation. He adjusted his cufflinks as if the outcome were already certain. "Let's begin," the chairman said. Ross rose first, pacing like he owned the stage. "This is simple. Equipment vanished, funds shifted, logs point to one man, Jack Monroe. No offense to custodial staff everywhere, but let's be realistic. You don't trust the future of a multi-billion-dollar firm to someone who mops floors." A ripple of polite chuckles moved through the board. Jack's jaw tightened. Ross leaned closer, voice dropping. "Monroe is guilty. Fire him, close the matter. Protect the company. Anything else is distraction." Isabel's voice cut in cool and sharp. "Distraction, Ross, or diversion?" Eyes turned to her. She slid a folder across the table. Photocopies spilled out transaction records, equipment logs, timestamps. "This," she said, "is evidence, not rumor, not scapegoating. Evidence!" Her gaze locked on Ross. "Every discrepancy traces back to your department. Funds rerouted into shell accounts. Equipment moved under your authorization." Murmurs spread. The chairman frowned. Ross laughed too loudly, too fast. "Fabrications. Anyone can forge paper trails." Isabel tapped a page. "Unless the cameras agree. Not the ones you do the backups." She clicked a remote. The screen lit with grainy footage. Ross swiping his badge at midnight, hauling crates into a truck. The room fell still. Jack's voice broke the silence, calm but carrying. "For weeks I let him call me a thief. I took the shame because that's what men like me are used to. But truth doesn't vanish just because someone with money says so." His eyes locked on Ross. "Maybe you never learned to look, but my daughter sees me, and she deserves a father who stands, not one who hides." The words landed like stone, heavier than testimony, undeniable. Ross slammed a fist against the table. "This is a setup. You think I'll let a janitor and a rookie CEO ruin me? I built this company's profits on theft." Isabel snapped back on lies and on the backs of people you thought too small to fight. The chairman raised a hand for order, but the tension was uncontainable. Board members whispered, leaning forward, their eyes sharp. Now Ross was cornered. Jack's calm only deepened the cut. "I spent 3 years silent. Silence doesn't save, it suffocates. Today I'm done being silent." One board member cleared her throat. "Mr. Weller, these records are troubling." Another added, "If this holds, It's embezzlement fraud. Ross's mask cracked. His eyes darted desperate. You're fools if you believe a janitor's sob story. He turned on Isabel, venom in his voice. And you'll regret siding with him. But Isabel stepped closer, voice level but searing. The only regret I'll have is not speaking sooner. You underestimated Jack Monroe. That was your mistake. And today it's your undoing. The chairman finally slammed the gavel. Enough. This requires a vote. Ross straightened, trying to recover. Yes, vote. Remove Monroe. Move forward. The chairman's eyes narrowed. Not on Monroe. On you. Gasps broke the silence. Ross's smirk shattered. The vote was swift hands, raised, voices counted. When it was over, Ross sat, frozen color drained. The verdict termination. Investigation. Security entered quietly, standing at the doors. For the first time, Ross Weller looked small. He rose, trying to salvage dignity, but his eyes flicked toward Jack, burning, promising it wasn't over. Then he stormed out the doors, shutting with a heavy thud. The boardroom exhaled, paper shuffled, whispers returned. But at the far end, Jack sat motionless, adrenaline still coursing. Isabel laid a hand on his shoulder. You did it, she whispered. Jack shook his head. No, we did. For the first time in years, he felt seen. Not as a janitor, not as a shadow, as a man who stood and was heard. But even as relief settled, a chill lingered, because men like Ross didn't fall quietly, and somewhere in the echo of that slammed door, danger promised it was still waiting. Rain hammered the tall glass windows of a Hartman Tower's 25th floor. The building still carried echoes of yesterday's storm. Ross dragged out in disgrace, his fury stamped on every face that had watched him fall. But Ross wasn't gone. His shadow lingered like smoke, refusing to clear. That night, Jack Monroe sat in his janitor's closet, half sanctuary, half cell. Emily perched on a folding chair, swinging her legs, her backpack clutched tight. Jack watched, her, finally allowing himself to breathe. The door burst open. Isabel strode in her composure. Cracked phone clenched in her hand. Jack, she said, breath ragged. We have a problem. He pulled Emily close instinctively. What is it? She handed him the phone. On screen, mock headlines, CEO's secret affair with janitor. Daughter used as pawn. Each line poisoned with malice. Emily frowned. They're lying about you, Dad. Jack's jaw locked. He closed the phone gently, setting it on a shelf. Lies travel faster than truth, he said quietly. Ross is behind this, Isabel whispered, guilt flashing across her face. He's leaking stories. He'll drag Emily into it. If the press runs this, her name will be everywhere. Jack knelt before his daughter, rough hands framing her cheeks. His voice was steady, but fire burned behind it. Listen, Em. They can call me whatever they want, but you will never be their weapon. I promise. Her eyes welled, but how Jack stood meeting Isabel's gaze, his shadow stretched long against the floor. I don't care what the world thinks of me. I only care what she sees when she looks at me. Isabel's throat tightened. Jack, you don't have to stand alone anymore. For weeks, their words had been edged with mistrust. Now, truth pressed them together, raw and undeniable. He studied her. Why are you doing this? Because I've seen who you are, she said, voice firming. And because Ross isn't finished, men like him lash out when they're cornered. Jack nodded. He knew desperate men too well. By morning, whispers rippled through the building like static. Screams glowed with half-truths. Some sneered, some stared. Emily's name wasn't out yet, but the danger hovered like a blade. In the cafeteria, Jack caught fragments. Is it true? CEO and a janitor. Pathetic. He's dragging his kid into it. Jack walked straight back, carrying his tray as though the noise couldn't touch him. But inside, A weight churned. That afternoon, Isabel gathered her inner circle. Jack was surprised when she motioned for him to join. Ross wasn't in the room, but his presence haunted every word. "He's leaking forged documents," Isabel said. "We've traced them to an outside firm. If we intercept the next drop, we can tie it to him. Fraud, defamation, everything." Jack folded his arms. "And if we can't," she met his eyes, "then tomorrow's headline is you and Emily." The silence was suffocating. Jack could almost feel his daughter's hand in his, even from miles away. He broke it. "Then we stop him tonight. Midnight." The building lay empty, washed in rain and neon glow. Isabel stood in her office, the city sprawling beneath her. Jack arrived with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, tools from another life. "This isn't a boardroom fight anymore," he said. "This is about proof. Cutting him off before he poisons everything." She looked at the bag. "You sound like a soldier." "I'm not," Jack said softly. "I'm just a father." For a moment they stood in silence, reflections side by side in the glass. Two people against the world. Her phone buzzed, another email from Ross's proxy server. Jack unzipped the bag, pulling out wires and connectors, his movements sure and practiced. The muscle memory of a man who once handled live currents. "You're not just a janitor," Isabel murmured. He didn't look up. "I never was." The hours bled away. Rain battered the glass as Jack worked in silence, tracing the leak, bypassing firewalls. Isabel monitored the flow nerves raw. Finally, her screen flashed. An outbound transfer stalled, intercepted. Ross's name, his signature, proof undeniable. Her breath caught. "Jack, you did it." He leaned back, weary, wiping grease from his palms. "No, we did." For a heartbeat, something unspoken passed between them. Respect, admiration, something deeper. Then the office phone rang, shattering the moment. Isabel answered. Ross's voice hissed down the line. "You think you've won tomorrow? The city will know what kind of mother you'll never be, and what kind of father he never was." Jack froze, muscles taut. Isabel went pale. She whispered, "Jack, he's not finished." Jack stepped forward, his shadow falling across her desk. His voice was low, steady, unyielding. "Then neither am I." Morning broke gray and heavy as if the city itself were holding its breath. Rainwater still clung to the streets after the night storm, and at the base of Hartman Tower, news crews jostled for position. Cameras waited, hungry for scandal. Inside, Jack Monroe wasn't thinking about headlines. He was thinking about Emily. She sat in the corner of the boardroom, doodling in her notebook, blissfully unaware of the weight her father carried. Jack knelt beside her, brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, and asked softly, "You okay, kiddo?" Emily nodded, steady as stone. "As long as you're here, Dad?" Those words were enough to steel him for what was about to come. The doors burst, open. Ross strode in with a lawyer at his side, fury carved into every line of his face. "This is harassment," he shouted. "Doctored evidence lies. I built this company." Isabel stood tall at the head of the table, her voice cut clean. "It's not doctored. It's your signature, your accounts, every leak, every threat. We have it all." Ross snatched the folder from the table. His lawyer's color drained as he skimmed the pages. Jack stayed silent, arms crossed, eyes fixed on Ross. Ross's sneer turned sharp. "You think anyone will believe a janitor over me?" Jack's reply was calm, deliberate. "I don't need them to believe me. The truth speaks for itself, and it's standing right here." The tension broke when two uniformed officers entered. Badges flashing, the room stilled. Ross, Weller. One officer said, "You're under arrest for fraud, sabotage, and attempted extortion." Ross shoved his chair back. "Fighting. This is a setup. You can't do this to me." Jack stepped forward, blocking his path. He didn't raise a hand. He didn't need to. His steady presence stopped Ross cold. "You did this to yourself," Jack said quietly. The cuffs clicked shut. The officers led Ross away, his shouts fading down the hall until only silence remained. The boardroom exhaled. For the first time in weeks, it felt like the storm had broken. Isabel looked at Jack. "You didn't have to stand in front of him like that." Jack shrugged. "Sometimes you don't win by fighting. You win by standing your ground." Her eyes softened. "Thank you, Jack. Not just for today, for everything." He looked down at his callous hands. "I just did what I had to, not just for Emily, but for myself, so she could see the truth is worth fighting for." Maybe Isabel said, her voice quiet, "But you reminded us all what integrity looks like." That afternoon, the tower felt lighter. Employees smiled again. The whispers had shifted from scandal to admiration. In the lobby, Jack and Emily stood with a small duffel bag, ready to leave. Isabel found them there, no longer in armor, just a woman who had walked through fire and come out scarred, but stronger. "Going somewhere?" she asked gently. Jack gave a faint smile. "Time to take Emily home, somewhere quiet, somewhere that isn't glass walls." Isabel hesitated, then said, "I'd like to show you something first." She led them to the top floor, unlocking a studio long hidden. When the door opened, golden afternoon light poured in. The walls were bare, but at the far end stood canvases and half-finished paintings abandoned years before. "My mother's studio," Isabel whispered. "She was an artist. I locked it away after she died. Thought I didn't need it anymore." Her eyes lifted. But I was wrong. This wasn't weakness. This was place that holds. Emily wandered to a canvas, her small fingers brushing across a sunrise, half captured in paint. "It's beautiful," she murmured. Jack looked at Isabel beneath the CEO, beneath the armor. She was just a daughter carrying grief, just as he was a father carrying love. Isabel stepped closer. "You don't have to disappear again, Jack. You and Emily. You belong somewhere." For the first time, he let himself believe it. Emily tugged his sleeve. "Dad, can we stay for a little while?" Jack knelt, meeting her hopeful eyes. "Yeah, kiddo, we can." As the sun dipped lower, laughter filled the studio. Emily painted clumsy strokes across a blank canvas, her giggles echoing off the walls. Jack whispered almost to himself, "Feels like I've been running forever, but maybe this is it. Maybe this is home." Isabel's answer was steady. "Home isn't. Walls or windows. It's the people you choose to stand beside." Jack turned, met her gaze, and for the first time since his world had burned down, he smiled fully. No fear, no walls. The storm was over. The fight was done. For Jack and Emily, tomorrow was no longer a threat. It was a promise. And in the quiet glow of that studio, as paint met canvas and laughter rose like music, none of them knew the story. That began in shadows had only just begun to find its light. Not perfection, not applause, just a place to rest our scars, a place to begin again with someone who sees us even in our quietest battles. If this story touched something in your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop a comment and share your thoughts. Your story matters here too. And if you believe in second chances, in quiet courage, and in the power of love that heals, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. There's always another story waiting, and it just might be yours. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and never stop believing in